What's up, you guys? Ross Sapp, managing editor, FightfulMMA.com. Go over there, get all of your MMA news. Subscribe to this channel if you're watching live on YouTube. We have news updates, James Lynch's interviews, a lot of boxing updates and podcasts. But over at FightfulMMA.com, hundreds, if not thousands of comments each go around on our UFC coverages, on our Bellator coverages. We have pick'ems that run all year long, in which I won all 3 of last year. It was amazing. Pro wrestling, MMA, the combination. I won them all. I guess you could call me the Triple Crown winner, but I digress. I am joined today by a man who was nominated, did not win Journalist of the Year, but was nominated once upon a time, Showdown Joe.
Well, the fix was in back then, right? It's pretty obvious.
It was.
It was all Americans versus one Canadian.
So you were the best in Canada.
I guess so. Yeah. I think
International Journalist of the Year, Showdown Joe. We are also joined by a man who will likely be nominated for that many times in his career. One James Lynch. James, how you doing?
I'm doing awesome. I appreciate the endorsement.
There's a lot going on. Knee buckle gate. It's real. It's happening. We're going to talk about it. Let's jump right into it. UFC Phoenix, Cain Velasquez, Francis Ngannou. Before I share my slant, Showdown Joe, what do you think happened? Francis Ngannou beats Cain Velasquez. Immediately afterwards, Dominic Cruz says, his knee buckled. His knee buckled, guys. What did you see?
Listen, based on my conversations since that fight went down, I can attest that I am apparently in the extreme minority right now. What I saw was a guy's knee buckle. I did not see a strike that caused any sort of pain. I saw a guy that got hit, went in there to stabilize his takedown, and then the immediate wince of pain on his face. When you hit somebody or you knock them out, you never see winces of pain. You just see the head bobble back and forth. What I saw was a guy's knee completely get blown out or get damaged and then go down to like, oh my God, I'm in so much pain here. And then Ngannou, the power man, just coming down and pounding him. So, of course, the ref's going to stop that fight because Cain's not going to be able to intelligently defend himself. But in my opinion, his knee buckled. And kudos to Francis. You know, he got the win. Got to do what you got to do. But I would like to see a rematch because I don't think that was the fair result. I know I'm probably in the minority here. I talked to so many people, but I'm like, I watched the replay 10, 15 times. That's what I saw.
Well, hey, we can run it back in 2023 when Cain fights again. James, what did you see?
I thought he did get hit. One of the replays I saw, it wasn't as prevalent as, I mean, obviously with the fact that we're even talking about it, I think kind of shows that. But he did get hit slightly. One of the replays I saw, you can see his face sort of take impact just on one of the angles that I saw. I mean, certainly the knee went out as well, but to me it wasn't anything controversial. I thought he did get hit. Regardless, I think if your knee's going out or whatever, I think that's probably Father Time telling you something. It's unfortunate, man. I remember like watching this fight on Sunday just before it went out. I got really excited. Every time you see Cain Velasquez fight, it's usually usually delivers, and this just, I don't know, it just didn't look the same. And I think the MMA gods might be telling Cain something after that result.
Yeah, I do believe that Cain got hit. I believe that's what buckled him. It split him up. There was some footage that had emerged of him like being ginger on the knee ahead of time. I think this is a great win for Francis Ngannou, and for better or for worse, this fight played out exactly as not just the three of us, as most people expected. And I think if you're Francis Ngannou, I think you kind of know your game plan at this point, Joe. You throw your hands at somebody's face. If it connects, that's great. Everything else is a backup plan.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, that's his strength, right? That's his strength, and he's got so much power, and his precision is getting much, much better. I think actually his precision has been pretty good, even going way back before I think it was the Arlovsky fight. There was somebody that he competed against where he was just stalking. He was literally a predator. He was stalking his opponent, waiting for his time, and then boom, once he unleashed, it was over. We already know, the whole situation with Overeem. So we already know that joke, and I think Daniel Cormier said it was best. They're still looking for his Overeem's skull in the moon somewhere. So yeah, I get it. But in terms of Ngannou, my goodness, does he have power? But I didn't see it in this fight, guys. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I think this was a situation where Cain's knee blew out, and that was it.
So I want to know what's next for these guys. Francis Ngannou's name is in the conversation. However, immediately following this show, Dana White said, Daniel Cormier is hurt, so I'm not going to announce anything. But we do have his next fight lined up. James Lynch, who do you think is lined up for Cormier? Personally, I'm thinking, man, Miocic needs to fight again. But Brock's out there. He's free and clear in about 2 months.
I really think that they're trying to do Jones. I know this sounds weird, but I think that that's what he was referring to, and that's why we haven't heard an official announcement yet. Is that they're waiting to see what happens at UFC 235. I think if Jones loses, you could still do that fight at heavyweight. You know, just because of the intrigue factor, because of everything that surrounded, you know, their second fight and even their first fight, obviously too. Just I think that is the big money fight. Look, I see a lot of people talking about Francis Ngannou and Cormier. I love that matchup. I think it's awesome. But if you're DC, you're not taking that fight. You need a big payday, and there's 2 big paydays. There's Brock and there's John Jones, and that's it. I just don't see him rematching Stipe. I don't see him, you know, taking any other fight that isn't Jones or Brock at this point, because I think he knows he's done enough for the UFC. He's on the tail end of his career. You can't risk it by fighting a Stipe or Ngannou. Like, people are talking about how Ngannou, you know, obviously the win, you know, definitely propelled him, casual audience, whatever, but he's nowhere near the star power of Jones or Lesnar. People have to realize that he's not going to fight Cormier.
To be honest, if I'm the UFC, what I try to do is Cain Velasquez versus Stipe Miocic. I think that is a top flight fight. You can, man, you want to headline an ESPN show, or you want to add some real depth underneath a title fight on a pay-per-view. You have 2 arguably of the greatest heavyweights of all time battling it out. Joe, what do you think is next for Ngannou? What do you think is next for Cain?
I'm in total agreement with James. Like, I mean, in terms of just to go back for DC right now, the Brock Lesnar fight is #1 in my opinion. That's the fight that has to happen. The Jones fight would be second because it's still a money fight. It's a trilogy fight. I'd like to see it happen. The fact that people are talking about Ngannou versus DC and DC saying he wants to avenge that loss for Cain, I think it's great. I think it's more of an emotional fight for DC, but it's not a big payday fight, which is what he deserves. He deserves a big payday fight, a money fight, and that's something against Brock Lesnar and or #2, John Jones. In terms of Cain Velasquez, taking on Stipe Miocic, I think is for our sake, is a fantastic fight. I think it's a deserving fight, but people will say, well, Cain Velasquez hasn't fought in 74 years, and he just fought now for the first time in 3/4 of a century, and he lost. Well, I won't consider this a loss, in my opinion, a real loss. So you give me Cain Velasquez versus Stipe Miocic, you're damn right I'm going to be paying attention to that fight. I think it's a fantastic fight. I think it says a lot. It would mean a lot for both of those guys to see, hey, Cain, you know what? Do you still have it? Do you or do you not? Because I don't think this fight versus Ngannou tells us whether he had it or not. I'm not sure about Father Time, James. I'm not sure if it's Father Time that caused the injury, other than because, look, I've had freak injuries before in the gym. Playing hockey, playing soccer, working at a full-time job, bending over to pick something, my pelvic bone switched or completely disadjusted itself. So freak things happen, right? Freak things happen. So give me Cain Velasquez versus Stipe Miocic. No ifs, ands, or buts. Stipe does not deserve a rematch with Daniel Cormier. I don't care if people think he is one of the greatest of all time. He got defeated decisively. If he did not, it was a close fight, guys. Yeah, you know what? Give me that rematch. But he did not. He needs to fight one more time. Why not fight Cain Velasquez? If Stipe Miocic had more of a marketing pedigree, if Stipe Miocic's stock value with the mainstream audience was out there, people would be screaming for this fight. Not just the hardcore fans, but people outside, out in the mainstream. They would be screaming for this fight. Nobody is screaming for this fight other than those perhaps inside the MMA bubble.
I think you got to make the fights that are just there and easy to make. The money, that's a thing I think Bellator is getting a little bit better at. If they think there's a money fight, they're just going to go ahead and make it. Like putting Daley and MVP in this round of the tournament, smart idea, but still a little bit too late. Joe, you talk about freak things happening. We always allege that there are freak things happening on James Vick's casting couch back in his in the background. I'm one to talk, right? But he had some freak things happen to his leg on Saturday or Sunday night, rather. Paul Felder chopped away at it. He gets a big win, James. This is an impressive victory and exactly what Paul Felder needed to do, in my opinion. Paul Felder quietly won 4 of 5. I mean, he's got that broadcasting gig. It is a good time to be Paul Felder right now.
Not if you're Paul Felder's lung. I don't know if you read about that his lung collapsed at the end of the fight. Just showing that the type of warrior this guy is. Yeah, he's another guy. His stock went up big time. That was a really impressive win over James Vick. Just hung in there, bit down on the mouthpiece. What I found so interesting about this fight, and I completely overlooked this, heading into the fight, Paul Felder by decision was plus 400. Because I think, the thing is, I think you thought if Felder was going to win, it was by knockout, and he certainly had his moments because, Vick has been knocked out before. But I think both guys put on a good show. Unfortunate for Vick. I think this is it for him at 155. I mean, if there is ever a signal to move up, I'm not saying the weight cut necessarily played a role in the loss, but his whole thing about why he wasn't moving up to 170 was, well, if I move up, I'm not going to be ranked very high. Well, I'll tell you what, he just lost to Paul Felder. He lost to Gaethje before that. I don't think he's going to be ranked very high at all in the lightweight division. So why not go up, save yourself the extra pounds, come in 100% where it's not, the cut's not making an impact here. So I'd like to see Vick go up. And I think Vick will be more successful. Like we saw Michael Chiesa move up. He looked great against Condit. I think we'll see the same thing here with Vick. And for Felder, he's in that conversation now, guys. He really is. He's in that, that sort of that range of getting bigger fights, bigger opponents. This is a huge win for him.
Including tough. James Vick heading into, I think last summer was 12-2 in the UFC. Unbelievable run, but he's dropped 2 against guys that you have to beat if you want that title shot. To me, the ranking doesn't mean a whole lot when you're losing to these guys. No disrespect to Felder and Gaethje. Those are more than passable wins, or more than formidable opponents. But you look at Paul Felder, and I think he's won 6 of his last 7 lightweight fights. And that Mike Perry, when he took on short notice, you can kind of throw that out. What did this victory say to you, Joe? Because obviously he overcame a lot in winning this fight.
Well, I think one of the most impressive things that I like about Paul Felder, especially in this fight here, is his facial reactions or lack thereof. His face doesn't change, whether he's executed a fantastic combination, lands a beautiful calf kick or 7 calf kicks, or getting tagged in the face. He continually moves forward. He continually stays focused and just gets the job done. I think it's fantastic for him. He moves up to number 10 in the rankings, which is pretty impressive. And what James said about Vick moving up to 170, to echo that sentiment, at 155, you cannot afford to even lose once. Losing twice is not a good thing, especially against the guys that are above you in the rankings. So at 170, when you take a look at James Vick's size, I mean, he's way bigger than Jorge Masvidal and guys of that nature. He's a big guy. He can use his reach. You have that extra weight to play around with. So it's a big jump from 155 to 170. It's 15 pounds, guys. So you do have to carry on a bit more weight. But if it's just natural weight and he's not suffering in the weight cut, I don't see why not. In terms of what could be next for Paul Felder, that's a fantastic question. I'd like to see him fight Kevin Lee, to be honest with you.
A couple of the women's fights on this show, some top 15 battles here. Andrea Lee obviously has overcome a lot personally over the last year, gets a unanimous decision win over Ashley Evans Smith. And in what was a puzzling ranking to me anyway, Courtney Casey was ranked above Cynthia Calvillo. That will no longer be the case. Calvillo picks up that win over Casey. We also saw Emily Whitmire just job out Alexandra Albu. Like, it wasn't even close, James. And Emily Whitmire was very emotional after her win, which was the quickest submission in women's strawweight history. What stood out to you out of these 3 women's fights?
Yeah, Whitmire looked great. I think we talked about it on the preview that her activity and her just being in Vegas, I think, really paid dividends in that matchup. Andrea Lee looked great. I'd like to see Andrea Lee without a couple months of distractions, like you had the Milwaukee fight canceled, you had her switching camps, the whole issue with her husband, everything else, or ex-husband, I should say. I think Ashley Evans Smith gave her a bit more than people thought, but let's see how Andrea is without all those distractions. I think she really could make a run at this. But yeah, Whitmire to me was the story here, because I think with her, even if you watched early in her career, when she fought for RFA or even on Tough, the skill set's there. It's just mentally she wasn't 100% there, and I think that you saw the skill set put to use in that fight, and I'm excited to see what's next for her.
Joe, anything stand out to you here?
I just Courtney Casey and both, even Ashley Evans Smith, not able to execute their techniques with some sort of like power. You know what I'm saying? Like, the technique was there, but just not having that punch and that power behind them. And I guess Cynthia kind of took advantage of that, as well as Andrea Lee. I liked her striking as well, obviously, in doing what she does. I didn't have a chance to watch the Emily Whitmire fight. I just read up on it. I tried to find it online. I couldn't even get it on Fight Pass. It just wasn't loading up properly. So I wasn't able to see that fight. By all accounts, She did a fantastic job in her fight. I mean, 61 seconds is pretty fantastic. But I'm interested to see what's going to happen with Cynthia, if she's going to get that fight or if not. And Andrea Lee, man, she's gone through a lot, obviously, and to be able to come out victorious, especially winning all 3 rounds on all 3 judges' scorecards, good for her.
We also saw Kron Gracie make his debut. First time we've seen a Gracie win in the UFC since 1994, Joe. What do you expect out of Kron Gracie?
He's going to get tagged. He better get that striking on point. I mean, people were messaging me that you got to check out this Kron Gracie and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I called 3 of his fights, guys. I know exactly who he is. He competed in Ryzen. I know everything about this guy back and forth. He's a Diaz brother through and through. Let's be honest for a second. But he's got to get that striking on point, because eventually there's going to be guys that will not allow him to clinch. I think that takedown, or the way he was able to take Caceres down, was absolutely awesome. Hooking the leg and then being able to just use the, not even power, but the technique to just lean his body to the one side, and it just made Caceres pop up in the air. And that's all Kron needs. Once he gets your back, you know, the worst thing for Kron Gracie in the UFC are the 5-minute time limits, 5-minute rounds. It's the worst thing for him. You give this guy 10 or 15 minutes like you saw against Kawajiri, he'll choke you out. Eventually, he's going to choke you out. So good for him. He's able to get that victory, but eventually at the featherweight division, you better get that striking on point. I know he's got it. He's got it. He uses it for one thing, guys. Strike, clinch, takedown. That's all he uses it for, but eventually he's going to run into some guys that are not going to be able to be taken down that easily.
James, we also saw Aljamain Sterling defeating Jimmy Rivera. This is as good as Aljamain Sterling has ever looked to me. This is the biggest win of his career, in my estimation. We watched that fight, and we see Aljamain Sterling on this career resurgence after he dropped those 2 fights to Assunção and Caraway, and of course he lost to Marias there, but now he's won 5 of 6. He's looking real good these days. Yeah, it's really incredible to see the improvements he's made, just like even over a couple fights. To take out Jimmy Rivera is no easy task. You know, I do have some questions about, you know, his takedowns, because, you know, he had some trouble with Rivera getting him down initially, but, you know, he sort of took over as it goes on. Yeah, I got to quit counting this guy out of fights, because I think I picked all of his fights wrong. He's been great, looking good, and, you know, just a nice surprise in the division. You know, I think there was a lot of hype when he came into the UFC, had some setbacks, but now it seems like he's really finding his stride. And at bantamweight right now, you know, I wouldn't mind seeing him face the winner of Garbrandt and Pedro Munoz, to be honest. I think he's earned a shot like that. You beat a guy like Rivera who has a good record, I think it earns you that spot. We also see Renan Barão probably on his way out of the UFC. If he sticks around, what can he do? He's already on the fight or the ESPN Plus prelims. He got cracked by Luke Sanders. And James, you spoke to Luke Sanders. He, you know, I don't want to say looked great or anything, but man, he did what he had to do, and he's given himself some new life in the UFC. He certainly has, and it's great to see Luke get the win here with everything he had to go through, you know, heading into the fight. I know he switched camps and things of that nature. So for him to get a win like that is just, you know, not only keeps his job in the UFC, but just, you know, good to see that he's able to continue his career. And for Barão, it's funny, Bellator mentioned their featherweight tournament yesterday. Barão would look pretty good there because, you know, he's a name. I mean, he's definitely a shell of the last fighter we saw, you know, when he was reigning the bantamweight division. But yeah, I mean, the fact that he missed weight again just speaks volumes to where his head's at this point. I mean, how many times did he miss? It's been a number of times now. And you know, this has got to be it for him in the UFC. I think he goes to Bellator next. Joe, what do you think?
He's not even ranked in the division he was a champion in. Okay.
Yeah.
So make a decision. You can't. It almost feels like every time he competes, there's an issue making weight. Something happens. He falls and bangs his head on a tub. He can't make weight for this one, 138, whatever. Like, I mean, it's you got to go to 145. But right now, looking up and down the top 15 plus the champion at 145, you probably want to go to Bellator. You may want to have a run if you want to run out your contract. Run it out at 145 pounds in the UFC. See what you have left, but then you got to go to Bellator. Maybe you can make some money, make some noise over there. But man, look at some of the guys that are at 145 in the top 15. None of the 3 of us here can say that Renan Barão's got a really good chance against any one of those guys, right? So
I look forward to Bellator Antarctica, Barão versus Pitbull. Nick Lenz picks up a win. Manny Bermudez picks up a win. And Andre Fili defeats Miles Jury. And then Vicente Luque comes back and beats Brian Barberena in a banger, Joe. That fight was amazing. Barberena might have had it if it lasted 6 more seconds. One of my I got 5 on it would have had it if just a few more seconds, but this was a blast.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I remember James, do you remember when I used to do the things on UFC Central, the getting to know segments?
Yep, of course.
One of the questions that I would always ask the fighters. So Sean, what it was is we would bank questions specifically and ask every fighter that we would run into the same questions over and over again, and we would build what's called the getting to know segment. And one of the questions I would often ask fighters in various divisions was, what do you do when you're competing against an opponent that you've thrown everything imaginable at him or her, and they just won't go away? What does the mindset? What do you do in that type of situation? And here we saw it in this fight here with Vicente just taking on Barberena. It's like, what am I going to do to knock this guy out? Like, I'm hitting him with everything, and he just keeps coming at me like a zombie. And eventually it paid off with 6 seconds left in the fight. But, man, what a classic scrap, especially even the end of the first round. But these two guys going at each other, man, Barberena's something special, but got to get some head movement going. You can't keep taking those shots all the time.
James, as we wrap up this show, anything else that you'll remember from UFC Phoenix?
Yeah, a couple things. I thought that, Andre Fili looked good against Miles Jury. He's a guy who's sort of turned things around a little bit. He always fights to a close decision, but this was pretty decisive in beating Miles Jury. I like Manny Bermudez's win over Benito Lopez, but overshadowed with him missing weight. One of the fights I suggested for Bermudez next, just because he's calling out these prospects. I don't like matchups like that. You got to build your division. I don't like the O'Malley or the Katona call out. Why not Hani Yahya? Coming off a loss, but a submission specialist. Let's see whose jiu-jitsu's better. I think that fight would be interesting. Nick Lentz looked good. Again, a guy who was counted out in this fight against Holtzman. And Luque and Barberena, yeah, I think Luque is a guy too that, like you said, he did pull it out at the end, but still another finish. This guy's got to get a named opponent next. His only loss in his last couple of fights is to Leon Edwards. Maybe you give him the winner of Edwards and Gunnar Nelson or something along those lines. People might say he doesn't deserve it, but you got to look at the resume right now. He's just finishing guys left, right, and center. This is a really good card overall. Nice way for the UFC era on ESPN to kick off on the main channel.
They did great ratings again. This move to ESPN, Joe, has been a wild success for the UFC.
Well, not for Cain Velasquez, because they first used him versus Junior Dos Santos in the very first Fox fight. He ended up losing his title, and then they used him again for the big ESPN show, and he ended up losing that fight. So if they ever move stations, again, don't put Cain Velasquez. Cain Velasquez should not be signing on the dotted line to compete in the main event, because history has shown that he's 0-2 when he does that. But other than that, yeah, I mean, the ratings are fantastic, and it's just good. It's good. I think they're we don't have it here, Sean, but I'm assuming they're getting some good promotion on ESPN for their events, unlike they get here on their sister channel. So there's not really much promotion. Back in the day when we were on Sportsnet, you would catch our commercials or me at Leafs games or Oilers games or baseball Jays games. We were there always promoting the show and back and forth and back and forth. I don't know what they're doing at ESPN because there's so much content there, but so far so good for the UFC for sure.
Also, they're getting great lead-ins, which really, really help. I mean, they often have like Duke basketball playing before UFC events, which really helps. Well, I'll tell you what didn't help. The super fight, Matt Mitrione, Sergey Haratonov, as Matt Mitrione called it, ended in a super dick kick. This was sad, James. This was just sad. He got paid 6 figures to kick a guy in the balls.
It was shades of Eric Prindle and Thiago Santos. Use an old Bellator reference there. Just extremely disappointing.
Didn't that happen like 7 times with them?
It happened, I think, a couple times, and they tried to rebook the fight. That whole thing was a disaster. This was the worst case scenario. I mean, this is fans get robbed. Mitrione's fine. Just a really, kind of sour way to end things. I mean, we'll talk about Bellator 216 in a second, I'm sure. But this hurt Bellator big time, because this was a fight that should have, given some other contenders in the heavyweight division, and it really solved nothing. And Mitrione wants a rematch. Stay the hell away from this fight. I think it's cursed. I think anytime a nut shot's involved, you don't do the rematch.
Yeah, Joe, you got anything on this one?
Well, you know what? I want to sort of I don't want to take a shot at Bellator's PR reps, but the next morning when I woke up and I looked at my email and they had the results of the show, all it said was no contest, nothing else. There's a variety of different ways to end a fight to end in a no contest. How about you put groin kick or something? Like there was nothing there whatsoever to tell anybody on that email blast how this or why this fight ended in a no contest. I thought that was extremely poor on Bellator's behalf. Like reread your press releases before you send them out, because not everybody watches your fights at the exact same time. Like I had no idea, and I'm like, I gotta go Google this and figure it out. And I'm like, oh, 15 seconds. I don't want to watch someone getting kicked in the nuts for 15 seconds or whatever it was. But yeah, cool.
On the other side of things, Dudu Dantes, Logan Storley, Austin Vanderford, they pick up wins. You had Amanda Bell, who I mentioned has a couple wins over some 4 horsewomen, so a little bit of value there, at least among hardcore female MMA fans. James, what do you like about this show?
There was some bright spots. Steve Mowry looked great on the prelims. He's a guy that I think the UFC wishes they had right now in their heavyweight prospect pool. I mean, he fought a guy who was making his debut, but Mowry is just a talent to watch. I'm excited to see what's next for him. Hopefully a named opponent. You also had Austin Vanderford, Paige Van Zant's husband, getting a pretty impressive win in the first round. Another guy I think the UFC let go of. He had that great win on Contender Series, a come from behind win. I know he's a welterweight, and I know the division's crowded, but I think there could have been room for him there. But that's great. Hopefully Bellator pushes him some more. How about John Duma? This guy was a kind of a nobody, and defeated the Mr. Highlight Mike Kimball in the first round. I thought that was impressive. Dantes back on the winning track. That's good. They need him to win because that division needs some more contenders. And Logan Storley is awesome. I know people don't like the wrestling that he does, kind of throwback to Askren or to, John Fitch, but he's still winning. He's 10-0. Let's get this guy a named opponent. Get him a Lorenz Larkin. Get him someone to test his skill set. He passed this one with flying colors against a guy that no one really cares about. Let's be honest here in Pascu. Some people said Eric Silva. No, let's not do that either. Let's get him a winning opponent, an interesting opponent, someone that's not going to be in the tournament right now, and get him fighting, because he's another guy I think that the wrestling community follows him a lot, the NCAA wrestling community, because he has some credentials there. Just keep pushing this guy. He's really interesting in my opinion.
Over on Bellator 216, the next night we had 3 heavyweight fights that I consider important, although one was really under the radar. Tyrell Fortune, who I could see fighting a Steve Mowry in the future, winning dominant fashion, as is tradition. Then you had some less exciting fights. Chet Congo gets his win back over Minikov. Mirko Krokop beats Roy Nelson. I do not know who pays to watch Roy Nelson fight in 2019, but if you do, you get what you deserve. Part of me, I'm a little bit happy Minikov didn't win, because I'm like, you're the reason this well, not your, but his relationship with Bellator was why we had this situation to begin with, this heavyweight tournament. But Chet Congo gets a win. Mirko Krokop gets a win. This fuels speculation of maybe Mirko Krokop and Fedor in the future. They have people calling for Krokop to pass by Congo to fight Bader. What do you see happening, and what did you see in those fights, Joe?
Well, I can tell you this, Krokop's retirement fight is Fedor. That's all he's wanted. That's why he went to Bellator, in my opinion. He's chasing Fedor. He wants to fight Fedor. I know when I spoke to him, and Trig and I spoke to him, the fight that he wanted to retire with was either Fedor or a young and up-and-comer. So he ended up going to Bellator. I know it didn't. Some of the rising people were not happy with it, but the quote over there is Krokop's going to do Krokop, right? So he went over to Bellator, defeats Roy Nelson. He wants Fedor to be his final fight, and I can see if Coker's smart enough, he'll probably put that fight on. I don't know if he will, but if he is smart, he'll do it. But I told you guys last week, Chet Congo was, I thought he was going to beat Minikov. He did, but obviously in decision fashion. I mean, 4 of those fights in the main card went to the decision. I will say this: I didn't see the Paige Daley fight. I do want to watch it because of the controversy. I'll
no,
leave
you don't.
You
don't want to watch it. It was really bad. Yeah, I'll just say that. I mean, Sean, I don't know. Chime in here. I don't know. I thought it was awful. It was like Derek Lewis and Ngannou. I thought
the whole show sucked. The main fight sucked on this show, and Bellator fans were mad at me. Like, we were heavily disliked on our post show. And I mean, I do some things to generate some clickety clacks on those anyway. Got to make the money, but no.
Garbage. They didn't like. It was just 5 rounds of stupidity.
Yeah. Paul Daley tried to out wrestle. Like, just think about it. Paul Daley, Mr. Wrestling Kryptonite, tried to out wrestle.
We'll go ahead and talk about this. MVP defeated Paul Daley. Paul Daley, the guy who inside the cage said, "Boo, Bellator! Boo!" And booed the fact that he was getting out wrestled, stepped in. How many strikes did he throw the first round, James?
Oh, it was like nothing. Yeah, I can't
0?
remember. Yeah.
0. And tried to wrestle MVP. Now, hey, if you're winning the fight, that's fine. But he was a giant hypocrite, James.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great, I forget who tweeted, I think it was Justin Fox who, got an article from an interview that Daley did. And he says, it was something along the lines of like, oh, if he decides to wrestle, then I'm just going to tap out. I forget. It was something like that, where it's like Daley did the exact opposite of what he said he was going to do. And it was just Daley wrestling. And it's just like, my God. And like, this was like worst case scenario, like big time. It was a boring fight. Page won, but Page looked, he got exposed in my opinion. I mean, it just, the fact that Paul Daley, who's not a wrestler, out wrestled him to a certain degree. He won Page ended up winning. It was a close fight. I mean, it could have gone either way, but I mean, Page is fighting Douglas Lima. That line has got to be crazy in the favor of Douglas Lima. Like there was nothing in that fight that made you think that Page could hang with any of the fighters in that tournament, in my opinion. And for Daley, I mean, he didn't win. So, I mean, it's just the whole thing. I don't want to see this rematch. This was just like a terrible way to end this weekend for Bellator. And it really overshadowed some of the good stuff that did happen. But this was just put a real sour taste in fans' mouths.
It was garbage. Yaroslav Amosov also won. He looks good. He utilized the blueprint to beat Eric Silva. Eric Silva punches himself out. You beat him. James?
Yeah, look, another good talent, kind of like Storley, where he's sort of flying under the radar a little bit, but this was a good win. Eric Silva, I mean, he's another guy like Barao, where he hasn't been the same, since his heyday. And I don't know what they do with him. I guess just give him fun matchups at this point, but he's not going anywhere near a title. Amosov is. I mean, one other person I want to mention, Valerie Loretta looked good. I mean, she sort of had a gimme fight, but you have to do that with prospects. She's 20 years old. Has a Taekwondo background, got a lot of media pop. I saw she was on the MMA Hour yesterday. That's good. Attractive girl as well, so you can market her. I think there's some potential there for her. That was sort of one of the few bright spots here, but like even Minakov losing, that's bad too, because they could have at least sold the Bader fight with Minakov as like this undefeated guy, this undefeated Russian fighting the American. They can't do that now. No one wants to see Kongo and Bader, including Bader. Did you see the tweet? He's like, I have no interest in fighting you. Like there's so many things that happen on the show that just really did not benefit Bellator whatsoever. And
imagine if years ago I had told you Ryan Bader doesn't want to fight someone because he's afraid it'd be too boring. God. Now, let's talk about the absolute set of balls on Scott Coker, who in December said, man, we would have put MVP and Daley in the UK, but distribution and finding a venue and a date. They ran Newcastle last weekend. They're running Ireland next weekend. Who are they headlining it with? James Gallagher. I got no interest in this show. Not a bit. You got Charlie Ward on the show. Okay, fine. Guy that lost 2 times in UFC, hit the bricks, all of a sudden he's winning in Bellator. No interest in this show, Joe. Joe, did you even know there was a show this weekend?
I'm going to go with what is no for 500, Sean.
James, any interest in this? Paul Redmond is on the prelims.
Yeah, I think this again is just one of those cards where I don't know if they're it's like they're partnering with another promotion in the UK. I can't remember which one. I don't think it's Bama, but it's one of them where they're just putting everything together. Unless Charlie Ward, the NBA player, was suiting up, I'd be more interested. But the NBA veteran. But yeah, I mean, Gallagher's fighting a 6-3 fighter. Like why? Like, I get you got to give him a bounce back fight, but like, come on. And then, this guy was asking for a rematch with Ricky Bandejas, and now he's fighting a 6-3 guy. It just doesn't make much sense. I don't have any interest. And I did forget it was this weekend. I knew it was coming up, but just zero interest. Unless you're a UK fan, I don't see many people tuning into this one.
Under the radar, but Invicta happened this past weekend. Vanessa Porto defeated Pearl Gonzalez. There was an eye poke that technically ended it, but it went to a technical decision. A hiccup for Pearl Gonzalez, definitely. She was not winning that fight anyway, but Vanessa Porto is a pretty formidable competitor. A lot of people who would be in Pearl Gonzalez's shoes would have just wrapped it up. We've seen it time after time. People, especially in the women's division, they lose out of the UFC. They never fight again. She has went to Invicta and worked to get better. And that says a lot to me. She's won 3 of 4 in Invicta. Vanessa Porto becomes a champion. Karina Rodriguez defeats Milena Dudavia, which that's a pretty solid win for her. I guess Dudavia lost her way out of the UFC, hasn't done well in Invicta, but as we see Karina Rodriguez trying to probably get herself to the UFC, that one stood out. And then you had Deanna Bennett defeating Miranda Maverick. Those were really the 3 top fights. And Bennett is another person who I thought at one point, probably about 2015, she would be in the UFC, but she just did not have a good run at the end of her Invicta run on Tough or the UFC, but has put together a couple of good wins in Invicta. But this weekend, we have UFC Prague. UFC Prague. Early in the morning, I think. I think it starts
2 p.m. Eastern time is the...
I am down for that. Give me that. James, what are you looking for out of this show? Not exactly the most hyped card in the world.
Yeah, and not really like it's a good fight in the main event, but it's not like one of those ones that really like captivates your attention. There's some interesting matchups on here, but mainly, with the European cards, you tend to just get a showcase of, some of the up and coming talent here. Just looking sort of at the bottom of the card, Rustam Khabibulov and Diego Ferreira should be an interesting matchup. Khabibulov is a guy that's really tough to beat, and Ferreira is a guy that has been on a roll, 14-2 record, had a bit of a layoff there, but always finished his fights. Chris Fishgold, looking to bounce back after his loss to Calvin Kattar's interesting. But yeah, there's a lot of John Dodson and Peter Yan's interesting. I'm actually really surprised Dodson took this fight because that's not an easy outing for Dodson. Yan is sort of the future, and I think that's why they put this fight together. But yeah, this is just, it's like one of those like a fight night card, but you'll tune in and watch it, but nothing really stands out here. Like I'm just looking at sort of some of the names. There's nothing really like, the main event is going to be good for the obviously the light heavyweight division, but other than that, not a lot going on here.
Yeah, this prelim card is very uncelebrated, I should say. Diego Ferreira plus 115, Rustam Khabibulov minus 135. You have Joel Alvarez at a plus 210 taking on Ismagulov, a minus 250. Chris Fishgold, a minus 250, taking on Daniel Tamer, a plus 210. Ismail Nardiev is a plus 325 against Mikhail Prazeres, a minus 400. You have Hadzovic at a plus 120. Marco Polo Reyes at a minus 140. Carlo Pedersoli Jr., a minus 125. Dwight Grant, a plus 105. Jillian Robertson, who we spoke to here on Fightful, a minus 145. Veronica Macedo, a plus 125. So at least on this prelim show, there are some possible flyers that maybe I'd put 5 on. But Joe, anything that really stands out to you, like, man, there's value on them, or I'm really looking forward to this fight or this person perform?
There's nothing that I could see. Praceres at minus 400 is kind of ridiculous. Not kind of ridiculous. It just seems so high, but everything is pretty tight and pretty close here. So the only thing that I see value on is what we're going to get to in a moment, but it's not even value. So yeah, I got nothing on this. No 5s on this undercard.
Anybody that you're looking forward to watching perform? I know that you spoke to Jillian Robertson ahead of this show, James.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this fight with her is that, Dean Thomas is normally in her corner for her fights, and, she's used to having him around, and that's actually why she went to Rufus Sport, because Dean is over there with Tyron Woodley, who's getting ready for his fight, but Dean won't be at this fight because it's too much for him to, fly back and forth because he's got to be there for Woodley the week after. So I don't know if that's going to impact her. She's coming off a loss. Really needs to bounce back here. So that's sort of interesting to me to see how that matchup goes, taking on Macedo, who's 5-2-1. So you never know what could happen there. But I think that's probably one of the ones I'm a little bit more intrigued with. But the rest of them, that and probably the Khabibulov and Ferreira fight. But yeah, this is just I don't know, just not a very strong card, to be honest.
Well, that's a good fight, though. Khabibulov, I spent time with Khabibulov and Nurmagomedov and those guys when we were in Bahrain. Just a fantastic fighter. He just hasn't been able to take it to that next level. But against Ferreira, that's going to be a good scrap. I like that one.
The main card has at least one person per fight that I'm very interested in seeing, at the very least. You have Ankalaev, who had a great performance last time out. He's a minus 230 over De Abreu, a plus 190. That line, James, how do you see that? It's shifting a little bit, but Ankalaev got beat his first time out, but had a great performance last time.
Yeah, I'm pretty. The fact that it's at 205, I think, is interesting because that's a division that sort of needs to build up, sort of the lower half. So yeah, I mean, big implications for both these guys. I mean, we just saw Anthony Smith, the run that he's gone on to get a title shot, just shows you how wide open this division is. So big fight here. Ankalaev, I think, is probably going to take this one home, but we'll see what happens. We've seen closer fights here, but I just think his skill set overall is superior to Ferreras. I don't know how you say that, but I think he'll get it done here. I think this is a fight to sort of showcase him. That's why it's the first fight on the main card.
Yeah, Klidson has like 6 names. It's Klidson, Ferris, De Abreu. A little bit under the radar, but Ferris does have a big win over one Johnny Walker. So that says a lot, and I think he's on a 6-fight winning streak. This will probably be one of my I got 5 on it. But you go 1 fight up. Peter Yan at -265. John Dodson at +225. I think that's one you got 5 on. I'll make my official picks later. But this is a big fight in the career of both, Joe.
I got 5 on Dodson in a heartbeat in this one. Not to take anything away from Peter, but what? Yeah, I'll take. I mean, Dodson. We just know he just can't pull that trigger. He just hasn't been able to pull that trigger in so many of his 7 of his last 8 fights, in my opinion.
Wait till you see the size difference in this one, though.
I know. It'll be interesting to see, but speed kills, and if John can use his speed, this is it. This is where you put your 5 on it. So interesting to see, because if he doesn't, I mean, you take a look at the rankings right now. Peter Yan's at 14, and Dodson's at 9. Peter Yan could be entering the top 10 potentially with a victory. So
Peter Yan's going to be the biggest looking 5'7.5" ever, because John Dodson is a generous 5'2". Peter Yan has won 3 straight fights in the UFC, and of course he had that run as an ACB bantamweight. James, Dodson, inconsistent at best. I mean, inconsistency is really the tale of his career since the flyweight run that led to him getting beat by Demetrius Johnson. He's beaten the Manny Gamburians, Eddie Winelands, and Pedro Munoz's of the world. At least the latter of those, a solid victory. But Jimmy Rivera, Marlon Moraes, John Lineker, Demetrius Johnson, we run into this a lot. You get to the elite level, then he has trouble. I mean, it's hard to say Peter Yan at that elite level, but it's certainly something we could be talking about in a few years where we look at that and his name isn't that unreasonable to put next to Moraes or Jimmy Rivera or Lineker.
Huge fight here for both guys. Dodson, it's all about being relevant. For Yan, it's about, taking that veteran out and really propelling up the division here. I like Peter Yan here. I think he gets it done. I know that the experience isn't on his side, and the quality of opponents haven't been great for Yan in the UFC per se. But I think he gets it done. But again, if you're looking for value in this fight, for sure it's on Dodson. I mean, he's still dangerous. He still has knockout power. He's still very fast, like Joe referenced. I think that he's a guy that you can't just immediately write off in a matchup like this. That's what I said. Like when this matchup was announced, I was surprised Dodson took it because there's not a lot of upside for him. I mean, sure, if he gets the win, then he's sort of back where he was. But yeah, I think Jan's not like a household name. So I think if he loses this it might be the end of John Dodson in the UFC. We'll see.
Yeah, he is a guy who would get some offers. We have Liz Carmouche taking on Lucy Puda-lova. This is a good fight. 24-year-old Puda-lova has went 2-2 in the UFC. Liz Carmouche, I think, is a win or 2 away from a possible title shot. She is a person who I think always can be there. She will always have the benefit of that visual of her on Ronda Rousey's back, cranking away at her face to fall back on. And that's very good. And I am a big fan of watching Liz Carmouche fight just because it's a lot of fun usually. She is a -135. Puda-lova is a +115. I think this line is right where it's at. I would maybe have Carmouche as a little more of a favorite, James, but how do you see this one going?
Completely agree. One thing that Carmouche did, because I spoke to her ahead of this fight, is that she's not working for this camp. So she's actually focusing all of her energy on training, which is great. One of the things she's added in for strength and conditioning is underwater training. So just imagine, BJ Penn back in the day with the rock running through the water. But she's doing a lot of that. So I expect her cardio to be really good in this fight. And I just think, again, kind of like the last fight, I think experience, will play a factor here. Carmouche has fought the who's who. Puda-lova hasn't. I think we're going to see a great performance. And the other thing we got to mention too, guys, look at her teammates. Pearl Gonzalez just fought. She's got Lima McFarland defending her title coming up here soon. She's in a camp right now where all the women are getting ready. I think that's great for her. Everyone's sort of, guns a-blazing at the same time at San Diego Combat Academy. So I'm expecting Carmouche to win and potentially make a statement here. I think she's someone, even though she's 35, we can't count her out of the flyweight title picture because, again, she has a lot of experience, and I think she's going to look great in this fight.
You talk about that experience. She's fought the best at 115, 125, 135, 145. She's fought Marloes Coenen, Valentina Shevchenko, Sarah Kaufman, Ronda Rousey, Jessica Andrade, Alexis Davis twice, Miocic Tate. That's unbelievable. And Joe, we talked about the experience, but the thing with Liz Carmouche is she hasn't fought more than once a year since 2013. So since that year that she had the Ronda Rousey fight, she's never fought more than once in a calendar year. Will that play a role? Will it affect anything? I think personally, her going at this full time is the right thing to do. She has to at this point. When else?
Yeah, so there's an interesting dynamic when you think about that. She is 35 years old, okay, but she doesn't have the MMA mileage of a 35-year-old mixed martial artist. So you would think you look at this fight here and all the different dynamics and intangibles that you use to break down a fight. Her opponent's 24, so the youth factor is going to be there. But you use the youth factor when it's in a situation where a fighter who's older has had so much more mileage on their body. That's not the case. So I'm going to be very interested to see if Lucy can use her speed and her footwork to keep Liz Carmouche at bay, because you don't want to have her too close to you because she'll launch you. She'll take you down on the ground and hurt you. So Lucy's going to have to stay at bay and just pick her shots. And they both have a penchant for going the distance. So this fight, in my opinion, could go the distance. It could end up happening on points here. So I want to see. I want to see how it's going to be and how it's going to unfold. But I think if Liz does get a hold of her, guys, could get real ugly.
We also have John Volante in action. Anybody want to take a crack at pronouncing his opponent's name?
Michael.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I was going to say.
Paul Daley.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to rock with. Daley is a -200. Volante is a +170. For me, in a fight like this, it's almost pick'em odds because of Volante, and that's the story of his career. Almost every fight is a pick'em. James, who you got in this one?
To me, it could go either way. I'm going to go Daley, I think, in this one, even though he has the layoff. If you remember, he got it was a no contest. He was coming off of with Khalil Roundtree, and that was because he was flagged by USADA. So the layoff is concerning in this one. But Volante is so inconsistent. Like you mentioned, even his last fight, it was a split decision win. I think could have gone either way. To me, there's not. John Volante is the exact same fighter that we've seen for the last 3 years. There's nothing about him that really makes you think that he's going to do anything special or anything different. I know he does train a bit more with Stipe, which is encouraging. He's getting some good quality training, but I like Daley in this fight. I think he gets it done. Especially with this being a European card, I think he's going to really show up and get a big win here. And don't be surprised if he knocks out Volante, because Volante has been knocked out and he's just been too inconsistent for my liking. So there's no way I can pick him here.
Anything on this, Joe?
No, you know what? I'm over John Volante. You know what I'm saying? I'm done with the whole when Chris Weidman was preaching him as my #1 training partner and watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out. The one good thing about John Volante is that when he does go into a fight, it's a blue-collar fight. Bring your lunch bag or lunch box. You're fighting for 15 minutes. So we'll see what Michael can do, but I will lean towards the favorite in this fight. And Daley, check my check, catch a check, hopefully got 5 on it.
I think giving +170 odds on someone who has went to 4 consecutive split decisions, that's almost I got 5 on it worthy in its own. Co-main event, this is almost a pick'em. Stefan Struve against Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Struve is a +105. De Lima is a -125. Joe's is right where it should be. I mean, Stefan Struve has a habit of just giving fights away at some point. This is one of those guys up there with Uriah Hall in my estimation. He is almost the equivalent at heavyweight of all these tools, but never any real growth.
Yeah, it's strange that, it's the one knock on him has always been the whole jab thing. For a guy that tall, why can't you use your jab properly or sit on your punches and stuff like that? So it'll remain to be seen. I mean, Adam is coming off a victory when he returned to heavyweight, but it still went to the decision. Not Adam, excuse me, Marcus. So it's so tough to determine, What's going to happen in this fight here? I don't think it's going to be overly exciting. Then again, it is heavyweight, guys. Like heavyweights, anything can happen. And Struve has a penchant for, you think he's going to have a boring fight or you think he's not going to be able to execute, and then boom, he knocks his opponent out. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I don't know.
James.
Total coin flip, in my opinion. Struve's the underdog here. Should be noted, Struve, this is the last fight on his contract. So, maybe some urgency here. They don't usually keep fighters around after 3 straight losses, but he got another one here. As far as I know, he didn't train at Hard Knocks for this camp in the States. I think because of the proximity of where Prague is to where he lives in Holland. I think that, he decided to stay home for this one. So not getting some quality training partners, I don't think, as you would expect. I'll probably go to Lima in this one just because I think Struve at this point is just so unpredictable, but wouldn't it be nice to see him snap a 3-fight win streak and get a victory here, relatively close to home and, get the job done because, he needs it. If he goes into free agency off 4 straight losses, I don't imagine there's going to be that many calls to him after the fight.
If I am correct, I believe that Stefan Struve, believe it or not, 1.5 years younger than Francis Ngannou. It's unbelievable to think because he's been around in the UFC for a decade now. It'll be literally a decade this weekend that he fought and got beat by Junior Dos Santos, and that progression just never came. Jan Blachowicz against Thiago Santos, this is a good fight. I mean, it's not a, hey, everybody tune in, we're going to watch the fight, but it is a good main event for what they're doing. Jan Blachowicz, they're getting a little bit of mileage out of him, and I appreciate that. He's won 4 in a row, and to be honest with you, I thought he was getting cut after he lost to Patrick Cummins. I thought that was happening because when you looked at his fights, he had lost 4 or 5, all of them decisions. That's not usually something the UFC likes to make a habit of, hanging around on people like that, but we knew that he had a lot of potential because he was beating guys who at the very least were in the UFC. Obviously, at the end of their run, Houston Alexander, So Could You, Gorian Relic, in KSW. But since then, he's reeled off 4 straight wins, including 2 big ones, Manoa and Krylov. Although, is a win over Krylov ever really that big? He is taking on a Thiago Santos who, quite frankly, beat the challenger for next weekend's UFC light heavyweight title fight. Beat Eric Anders at light heavyweight. I consider that a real light heavyweight win because Eric Anders is just that big. Beat Jimmy Manoa. He's won 7 of his last 8 fights. He's only lost to David Branch, who quite frankly can compete as a light heavyweight. So I don't think that's like a big concern. But he is a -120. Blachowicz is a +100. Joe, who you got in this one?
Oh, dude, you know that Thiago Santos is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC to watch every single time. This guy is just a symphony of destruction. This guy's just violent, absolute violent. I mean, we're talking Justin Gaethje versus Eddie Alvarez type of violence here. This guy doesn't care. He will go until he's got his last breath in his lungs. There's no chance I'm going to go against Thiago Santos. I mean, he's one of my favorites in the UFC right now, strictly from a violent perspective. So I do enjoy watching his fights. I wish I could call one of his fights. But yeah, Thiago Santos for sure.
Interesting to note that Jan Blachowicz has never been stopped in the middle of a round by strikes. I think he got tapped out once, maybe 12 years ago. But other than that, I think So Could You. I think he had to quit on the stool or throw in the towel, whatever that may be. It's hard to imagine Santos winning any other way, at least in this fight. But James, what are your thoughts on this one?
I'm going with the upset here. I'm going Blachowicz. I think he gets it done by decision. I think he makes this dirty. I think he takes this. He's able to, neutralize Santos' stand-up and really just make this his fight. We saw that with Jimmy Manoa. This is a guy that you can't underestimate. I mean, these guys are so identical. I mean, they're both 35. They both have, pretty notable wins, under their belt. I guess Santos finished Jimmy Manoa, whereas Blachowicz took him to a decision, but still a dominating win nonetheless. I think what it comes down to for me is just that Blachowicz has been in the weight class longer. He's used to fighting bigger guys. I know Santos at one point fought at, I think, at welterweight. And he's looked good since moving up to 205. But I think the experience at light heavyweight will pay off for Blachowicz, and I expect him to pull off the upset here. This is a coin flip. I mean, if Santos goes out there and knocks him out, it would not surprise me either. But you just look at the durability of Blachowicz and what he's been able to do in the UFC so far, and just be a little bit of a surprise, to be honest. I think he takes home a really dirty decision in this fight, and people are going to be upset with how uneventful this fight is.
Got my UFC Prague. I got 5 on it. And an update from last week, I had picked Czech Congo. He ended up winning. Brian Barberino was seconds from winning. That would have been another 2 out of 3 for me. I'm going to go Nardayev, who is a plus 325 against Prazeres, who is minus 400. I expect Prazeres to win, but man, that line is too good to be true. Another line too good to be true. John Dodson, a plus 225 against Peter Yan, a minus 265. Another one where I'm expecting Yan to win, but quite frankly, John Dodson has the ability to beat almost anybody at bantamweight. I don't think necessarily anybody, but almost anybody. John Volante, a plus 170. As I mentioned, the guys went to 4 straight split decisions, so he can make it dirty, make it nasty. And Alexacek is a minus 200 there. So John Volante, plus 170. John Dodson, plus 225. Nardayev, a plus 325. These are just flyer picks. If you have an extra 5, put 5 on it. Joe, what do you get going on this week?
I got some guy in the chat saying that I said Cain won the fight. Apparently his hearing aid batteries are low. Change them. Settle down, Goofy. Go troll somebody else, loser.
It's like the Dorcases who show up and they're like, "Oh, you think wrestling's real?" I'm like, "Oh, okay."
God, I said the guy's knee blew out, dummy.
Oh,
not same old.
James, do you want to cuss at some of our viewers?
No, I gotta. one of us Canadians has to keep things polite here. No, I'm joking. I just had 2 interviews up on the site. Dwight Grant and Jillian Robertson. So you guys can check those out on Fightful. Follow me on Twitter at Lynch on Sports. Going to be doing a bunch of cool interviews this week. Just talked to Mo Green today, who's stepping in on short notice against Jeff Hughes, which is actually a rematch. People remember they fought in LFA last year. So Mo Green looking to you get some redemption here at UFC Wichita. And appreciate the time as always, guys.
Guys, you all should follow both of these fellas. Follow Carlos Toro as well. He's doing a lot of great boxing coverage here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Fightful MMA Boxing. Of course, visit FightfulMMA.com. I'm telling you guys, if you're missing out on these live coverages, join in. Hundreds or even thousands of comments sometimes, posting news videos all the time. James Lynch's interviews are up. Hey, the more traffic we do, the more we'll expand stuff like that. So thank you guys very much. Subscribe, leave a thumbs up.